Awesome. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the session, which will be discussing spelling bee preparation tips by our 2024 Scripps National Spelling Bee finalists. So before we start, just some announcements. The 2024 SpellPundit World Spelling Championship is coming up, and it is a great opportunity for spellers of all age ranges from junior to senior who are interested in using this platform just to hone their skills and get some practice in. Personally, I know I and a bunch of our other panelists were participants in SpellPundit's online spelling bees just to get some practice in before the regional and national levels. So it's definitely a great bee put together by a panel of very experienced former spellers and veterans. So be sure if you're interested to check out the SpellPundit World Spelling Championship. And also here are our 2024 Scripps National Spelling Bee finalists and semifinalists. And most of those students and successful spellers were SpellPundit students and used SpellPundit and its extensive resources to improve their knowledge. So, and again, this event is being held by SpellPundit. So first of all, a huge thank you to them. When I was a speller, events like this one were few and far between. So it's really great that they're doing events like this every single year and making it really accessible to whoever's interested. So a shout out to them. And we can move on to our event. So first, introductions. I'll begin by introducing myself. And first of all, it's so great to see so many people interested in the spelling bee and learning more about it here today. My name is Harini, and I'll be your MC for today's event. I'm a junior in high school now, but I've been involved in the spelling community since 2016 when I participated in my first bee. And I've competed in the Scripps National Spelling Bee in 2018, 19, 21, and 22, which was the year I won the bee. And I truly believe in the positive impact that the spelling bee has on these spellers, and I'm so happy to be here with you all today. And let's go on to the stars of our show, our panelists. We have absolutely amazing panelists with us here today, many of whom I've competed with. Each of them has at least 4 years of spelling bee experience, and collectively they have around 40 years of experience, which is incredible. And that means that they can answer almost any spelling bee related question that you might have. For all the panelists here, SpellPundit was a big part of their spelling bee journey, so they will share how they effectively use SpellPundit as well as other helpful resources. So on to our introductions. So our first panelist here today is someone that I'm sure all of you know. Bruhat Soma is an 8th grader from Tampa, Florida. And of course, his most incredible achievement is being the 2024 Scripps National Spelling Bee champion, which he won in his 3rd year of competition. So Bruhat will definitely be able to share with us incredibly insightful tips. On to our second panelist, Faizan Zaki, who is a 7th grader from Allen, Texas. Faizan qualified for Scripps in 2019, 2023, and 2024, and he placed 2nd in his final appearance, as well as winning and placing in the top 5 of many other national level bees. And I've seen Faizan competing since when he was maybe 7 years old, so I'm sure he can offer excellent tips from his own experience for the younger spellers here with us today. On to our next panelist, we have with us Ananya Prasanna, who is an 8th grader from Charlotte, North Carolina. She was the 2021 SpellPundit National Junior Spelling Bee champion, as well as participating in Scripps in 2023, 2022, and 2024, the last appearance of which she tied for 3rd place. On to our next panelist, Shrey Parikh. Shrey is a 7th grader from Rancho Cucamonga, California. He placed 11th in 2024 SpellPundit National Spelling Bee, as well as participating in Scripps in 2022 and 2024. And he placed 3rd in his last appearance in 2024. Our next panelist is Aditi Muthukumar, who she is in 9th grade from Westminster, Colorado. She competed at the Scripps National Spelling Bee in 2023 and 2024, placing 5th in 2024, as well as finaling in bees such as the SpellPundit Online Spelling Bee, Wishwin, and Words of Wisdom. Next, we have a panelist that I competed personally a lot, especially in the COVID online bee era, and that is Shraddha Rechamreddy. Shraddha is in ninth grade, and she's from San Jose, California. In 2023, she was the SpellPundit National Spelling Bee champion and has a whole list of championships in National Bees from 2020 through 2023. And she participated in Scripps from 2019, 2022, 2023, and 2024. She placed third in 2023 and tied for ninth at the 2024 Bee. Next, we have Alia Alpert. Alia is a ninth grader from Prescott, Arizona. She participated in the SpellPundit Bee every year since 2020, as well as competing in the Scripps National Spelling Bee in 2022 and 2024. Alia tied for ninth in both of her appearances at the National Bee, and I had the pleasure of competing in the finals along with Alia in 2022, so I'm so glad that she gets to share her experience with you all today. Moving on to our next panelist and our final panelist for today, Aryan Kadkar. Aryan is a ninth grader from Rochester Hills, Michigan. He participated in the SpellPundit Online Spelling Bee every year since 2021, and he has participated in the finals of many national competitions. Specifically, he tied for fifth at the 2023 Scripps National Spelling Bee and tied for ninth at the 2024 Scripps National Spelling Bee in the midst of many incredible achievements. So that is our incredible panel. And before we start the panel discussion, we do have some ground rules for the event for the audience. First, please mute yourselves throughout the discussion because we don't want to interrupt the panelists while they're answering questions. And if there are any questions during the discussion, please make sure to put them in the chat so we can either answer them with the panelists or in the chat so you can get your answer. Before we get started, can I get a thumbs up from all of our panelists to make sure that y'all are ready? Awesome. So let's get started. So our first topic will be the spelling bee journey. And a lot of the spellers here today are new to the bee. So let's talk about how you all started your journeys. So the first question is, how did you get into the spelling bee and what brought you into it? And when did you start your spelling bee journey? So let's start with Brohit.
Yeah, hello everyone. So the first spelling bee I ever did was in second grade, and I participated in North-South Foundation. It's a great bee. I did the regionals, and I placed 8th. So that was my first bee, but I got a lot from it, you know. When I stepped up to the microphone and I had to spell all of my words in that bee, that was really exciting for me, and that's really when I think I really wanted to continue and keep going. So that's really where my interest started.
That's awesome, Rohit. And Ananya, what about you?
Hi everyone. Hi Hernie. Thank you so much for introducing me. Um, so it first started in third grade for me when I got a school list from my school, and I mainly just studied that. And in a few weeks, my school spelling bee came, and after I won, instead of happy, I was so nervous about the district bee coming next. And at the time, I used this new website for me called SpellPundit, which had been introduced to me at the finals of a competition. And then after winning the district bee, it all shut down because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And for me, it led to boredom where I couldn't really find myself to do anything. So I thought, okay, I'm good at spelling, maybe just continue with that. And while everyone was wondering how to continue their spelling journeys, I'd really thank SpellPundit for this. They came up with this amazing virtual bee concept, which I started to participate in, and it just really brought a lot of light and interest to me, and it improved my spelling bee career. Yes.
Great answer. Thank you for sharing. Ananya, you mentioned school bee appearances, and school bee is like the starting point for a lot of prospective spellers. So a follow-up question that popped up was, how do you start preparing when you begin, and where do you start? For example, for a junior first-time competitor, like a first grader, what groups or lists of words should they focus on? So for this one, let's hear from Faizan, who I know started participating in bees from a pretty young age. So what do you think, Faizan?
Well, yeah, I started spelling in 2019 when I was in first grade, but I only started getting competitive around like fifth grade, and started learning how to spell at a higher level. If I had to give any advice to spellers, I would just say like start by going through the list and spell from slowly.
Awesome. That was super helpful. We also have some new spellers here who are a little older. So now imagine you're in sixth or seventh grade. What do you prepare and where do you start? And this one, let's ask Aditi. I know, Aditi, you had a later start than some of our other panelists. So what would you recommend for someone starting in sixth or seventh grade?
Yeah, so I did start kind of late. I officially began participating in the sixth grade. I recommended definitely some of the more common resources like SpellPundit, Words of Wisdom. I also definitely recommend working on building a foundation of roots and language patterns before going into more rote memorization. It's also a matter of time management and figuring out what works best for you.
Awesome. You also incorporated a little bit of tips in there, figuring out what works best for you. That's awesome. You all touched on this a little so far, but I wanted to dedicate some more time to this in particular. So what are the various spelling bee resources that are available for these spellers? So let's ask Shraddha first.
I'd say the main resources that help me would, first of all, there's like a book called Words of Wisdom. It's a really helpful book that helps you get started with like language rules and patterns, along with like basic roots that you need to know from like school B level. And of course, there is SpellPundit, which I found was the most invaluable resource that I ever used. All the word lists are applicable for like all sorts of levels of spelling bee competition. So I'd say that those two are the first like great places to start.
Awesome. How about Aryan? Do you have anything else you'd like to add? Any other resources that helped you?
So starting off as a speller, I mainly used Spell It, and you can like find copies of Spell It online, and I found that really helpful because it touched base on certain language rules and stuff, and it was divided by language, so we would like easily find out like oh like Italian rules would be like so and stuff. They had like separate sections for language rules, and I would also recommend like the Words from the Champs book. That book was also great. It was a great resource for me, and of course, Spell Pundit was a excellent resource for me. That was like probably my best resource that I used.
Can you all hear me? Awesome. I
Yeah.
just had a problem with my computer. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that answer. Thank you all for your thoughtful answers. Continuing on the topic of resources and preparation, let's talk about how to prepare in terms of strategies and tips that you all found helpful. So as elite spellers, this next question is one I'm sure you all get a lot. How many hours a day did you study? And how did you balance it with your schoolwork or other activities? So let's go to Shrey.
How many hours did I study? I would say when I started, I wasn't really studying that much. Like for example, fourth, fifth grade, it was probably like 1 to 2 hours a day. I wasn't really serious about spelling. I wasn't sure. But then when like sixth and seventh grade came, I started to like amp it up a little bit. And I was doing like 4 to 5 hours on weekdays and around like 6 to 7 on weekends. So I think amping it up as you get older and once you realize if you want to do spelling is the best course of action.
For sure, yeah, and I think a lot of spellers, myself included, can agree with that in terms of we increased how much we studied the older we got and the closer to eighth grade that we got. So thank you for that answer. Faizan, could you add on with how you organized your study time and what you used to study?
Yeah, as soon as I got home, I would take like a couple, like as soon as I got home from school, I would take like a couple minutes break, just to get in the mood for like studying. And then I would do like I would like do my studying for like about like 4 to 5 hours, and then do homework. Since uh like doing like studying, it's like it takes a certain amount of time, but homework you can either stretch it out into a long time or like short time. So since like homework was flexible for me, I just like mainly focused on doing like studying for spelling. Yeah.
Great. Adding on to that, you talked a little bit about like your schedule after school and how you sort of compartmentalized every single day. So, in that same train of thought, Rohit, how often did you study? And like the main question here is daily preparation required? And do you think consistent preparation is a key for mastering lots of words?
Yeah, so no matter how much you study, there are two things. One thing, do it because you want to study. Don't do it because like your parents make you do it or anything like that. Do it because you have a passion to. And the second thing is be consistent. So what I mean by that is doing 8 hours one day and doing 4 hours of prep the next day. Doing 6 hours those 2 days is better than that. And being consistent, no matter how much study time you do per day, just be consistent because if you aren't consistent, you'll eventually lose your knowledge faster. So consistency is the key for no matter how much you study.
Very wise words. Definitely a great tip for anybody looking to plan out how they want to study. And our next question, Aryan, Faizan touched a little bit on this, but I want to hear your personal experience. During a school day, how many words do you think that you would be able to learn effectively, and how would you plan that out?
Is that for me?
Aryan?
Oh,
Okay. So, how many words I would learn in a day? That's a bit complicated question because I have different schedules based on like different extracurriculars I did. I didn't, as like many people do, quit spelling, like do quit extracurriculars and do spelling only. I didn't do it that way. I had some extracurriculars, but they were like pretty small. So, about in a day, I would maybe do for testing, maybe like uh 6 to 7 sets on the weekdays and about like double that on the weekends for testing. But for learning, I would do maybe 15 days, the days I would do 15 sets the days I would do learning, and like about 30 sets I would do the days on the weekends. So I think yeah, that's pretty good amount.
Awesome. And you gave a very like structured measure, especially while like using SpellPundit, for example. So thank you for that great answer. Aditi, this next question is for you. Which do you think is better, studying alone or studying amongst a group of people? And this is especially if like family or friends don't really have time to help you study.
So I did a lot of individual studying. I had my parents quiz me on certain word lists that I was having trouble with, and it really helped me consolidate my knowledge. But if I wasn't able to find anyone to quiz me, if I was super busy or if my family was super busy, then I would use other quizzing resources like flashcards, SpellPundit, Quizlet, which would really, really help. I definitely recommend quizzing yourself. It helps you consolidate your knowledge, and this will help you retain more information rather than just cramming it into your brain and hoping to remember all of it.
So you mentioned quizzing yourself, Aditi. Do you have any particular like way you used to do that? Maybe flashcards? How would you do that?
So I do like flashcards for roots because roots are a very fundamental part of the spelling career, roots and language patterns. I would use flashcards for this, and then sometimes just if I had a root on one side of my sheet and then the definition on the other side, then I would maybe like cover up the definitions and then just quiz myself on the definitions of the roots. There's a lot of great ways to go about quizzing yourself and consolidating that knowledge. So once again, it's just what works best for you.
Awesome, thank you. Our next one is for Ananya. Ananya, what are the spelling rules? For example, IBLE versus ABLE or US versus OUS? And if possible, could you give us some examples on how you could use them in spelling bees to help you get your word right? I think you're
Sorry,
muted.
I was on mute. Yeah. So mainly you're just confirming what rules and roots really are and how they're helpful, right? Yeah. Okay. So rules and roots, for example, ABLE, IBLE, those are really important suffixes that come at the end of words, and they're helpful because it's important to know how to learn roots and apply them to words, because although memorizing words is really important, it's also important to know how a word is formed, because say, for example, you're on the stage and you don't know a word. How would you figure that out? You need to know rules, or you need to know roots. So say, for example, you don't know if a word ends in ABLE, IBLE. You would use Latin rules, because in Latin, RA, ARE means if a root ends in ARE, then you would add ABLE. If a root ends in IRE or ERE, you would use IBLE. And also, it's really good for your mental capacity in general, because if you memorize all the words, your brain will automatically get exhausted. So it's crucial to focus also on learning roots and knowing how to apply them rather than just focusing on rote memorization. Yeah.
Great answer. Yeah, I completely agree. When I was a speller, my mom's biggest worry was that I was an absolutely horrible memorizer. I still am to this day. So for students like me who just have trouble memorizing things and prefer to learn them and use that to apply it to other words, like Ananya mentioned, rules, roots, patterns are great for that. And on that same line, Shraddha, what roots would you say are important and why? And how do you know when to use them in competition?
I feel like the roots that are most important are roots that are from Greek and Latin, because words from that language of origin, they tend to be made up of like parts that can help you piece them together. I'd say there's never a time that roots aren't important in a competition. Even if you know a word, then you can still ask them to make sure that, like, oh, it's in the word, oh, I'm spelling it right. And if you don't know a word, that's when it becomes even more useful, because then you can try to figure out how the word is spelled without like confusing yourself, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And for some context on like the rules of the bee itself, you can ask for roots at the national bee and, for example, other national level bees. For example, you have to ask for the name of the root and its part of speech, language of origin, and based on that, the pronouncer or a judge will provide you a yes or no answer. So that's what Shraddha was saying. You can ask those questions to help you sort of solidify what you think the spelling of the word is. So great answer, Shraddha. And adding on to roots, another difficulty that beginning spellers face is where to find roots. So Faizan, where did you find roots and what do you think is the best way to study and apply them?
So I learned about roots through Scott's Words of Wisdom book. And I started and like once I started learning them, I was able to connect it to like words and their spellings. And so when I got a word in a B, I would just ask for a root to make sure I knew the spelling. So yeah, Words of Wisdom is a great place to learn roots.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And for those who don't know what Words of Wisdom is, it is a resource by a former speller by the name of Scott Reamer, which you can access, for example, on Amazon. And that was the resource that Faizan was talking about. And like our panelists have mentioned so far, they've talked about roots, they've talked about rules. Another aspect of spelling that is really, really important to be able to spell these words accurately are language patterns. So, what are language patterns and how do you use them? And could you please give some examples as well as resources to study them? And how about Shrey?
So yeah, language patterns are basically like characteristics in a language that if the word has that language of origin, then they're likely to show up in the word. So for example, like German is a good one because a lot of people can understand it. So like there was a winning word at Scripps like Scherenschnitte. Um so in German, usually the sh sound is sch, and then like the Eren part, um, in German that would be eren because of the s sound, and the e is a schwa in German, and then yeah. So I feel like um, language patterns are really essential because they can help you piece together a word if you don't know how to spell it.
For sure. And you actually unintentionally segued into our next question, which was that German and French are actually notoriously difficult languages. And Arian, can you offer any suggestions, of course, adding on to what Shrey has already said, about how to become better as spellers that have German and French as trouble spots, as they're very common trouble spots?
So German and French is a very like narrow topic, and German and French can be very simple if you memorize language patterns and stuff. French in particular has many like different like spellings for each of them, so you kind of have to go by case scenario. And I would recommend like sounding out the words and checking like if a spelling really makes sense. Whereas like, for example, for the schwa sound, like if you had a word, um, let's see, uh cut, right? Like just like a simple word like cut. If you put like an A for the schwa, that wouldn't make sense because it would be like cat, or like if you put an O in the schwa, that would make sense because it would be cod. So just like figuring things out like that. And French and German language rules are relatively hard, but I won't say that they're really hard. They're not really that hard, and they're very like rule by rule like scenario type thing. So yeah, I think maybe just like looking over words and practicing words would be really helpful, as you can find many like language patterns through that, and dictionary diving is also really helpful.
Awesome. So you mentioned dictionary diving at the end. Could you clarify what that means for the people who maybe don't exactly know?
Yeah, sure. So dictionary diving basically means to go in the dictionary and find words that correspond to some like language rule or like ending in a certain consonant pattern, or like ending like having a root with like some like a Greek root or something. So dictionary diving is just basically looking at the dictionary and kind of like concising it into like different lists to kind of memorize, and you can break down the dictionary that way. I think I found that really simple, and I found that really helpful. So
Awesome. Thank you for the explanation. So far we have talked about language patterns and roots, which are really helpful in spelling, but they're actually equally helpful in vocabulary, which has been a part of the National Spelling Bee since 2021. So how do you prepare for vocab? Are there any resources or tips? Let's hear from Bruhit.
Yeah, so vocabulary, never underestimate it because out of the maximum of out of the maximum of like 10 to 15 spelling questions you can get a maximum of 4 vocabulary questions on stage. And if you miss them, you're out. So it's really important to memorize vocabulary. So the first thing I did was there's this book called Sesquipedalia, and it was also written by Scott Weimer. And in the front of it, there's a 2,500 word list. So I wrote down all of the definitions for those words, and I memorized them. Also, something else I did was for when I was going through all of the words in SpellPundit, like for spelling, I would just browse through the definitions while I was quickly typing them. And then the words that I thought the definitions might be a bit tricky, or if I get the word on stage, I might not know the definition. I noted them down, and after I finished that iteration of doing SpellPundit, I would review all of them, and then sometimes my dad would quiz me on them, and sometimes I would just make flashcards or something like that. And one more thing, know your roots. Roots are very important. I think half of the words asked for vocabulary this year were from roots. So roots have definitions, and if you get a root with a if you get a word made of two roots, you could just figure out if you know the definition of both roots, you could just use that to figure out the real definition of the word. So let me give you an example. I think this was asked in 2023 vocab. The word is brachypterous. So this word, the Greek root brachy means short, and the Greek root pteron means wing. So if you know that, then you can get the definition short wing. And and that's exactly what the definition was that year. The option. So you could just basically, even if you've never seen that word, you could just guess the definition of that using roots. So roots are very important for vocabulary.
Awesome, Rohit. That was a very in-depth answer, which I'm sure a lot of these spellers will appreciate. You gave like a lot of great examples as well, so thank you for that. And Rohit mentioned reviewing words in SpellPundit, for example, reviewing mistakes. So this next question is sort of in that territory. Aditi, what is the best strategy to study new sets of words while reviewing the previous sets, specifically when there are lots of words to review? So for example, how do you remember so many words correctly?
I would say 100% repetition. The more times you complete sets and the more you're able to reinforce them, the better. I think this is so beneficial for memorization. Repetition is key. If you're able to alternate between learning the words' spellings, definitions, languages of origin, and quizzing yourself on them, that's a really good tool. If you are forgetting key details like the spelling or definitions of the words, then using key parts of the definition, the language of origin, the part of speech, those are all great ways to help piece together a word, even if you're not up to memorizing them yet.
Awesome. Yeah, great answer. So about especially like revising, I think we'll also hear from one more person. Maybe let's hear from Shrey, for example, because study techniques are very individualized. So Shrey, what is your opinion on how to remember so many words correctly when you're seeing a lot of words?
What I would do is take all your missed words from SpellPundit or anywhere, put them in a Google Sheet, and as you're doing new words, let's say you're doing like 2,000 new words a day, remember to revise maybe 500 words from your sheet, so that way you can get the information to stick in your head while also learning new material. So I think that's like one of the best ways to quiz yourself on the missed words. Also, there's SpellPundit custom lists. So you can take your like missed words from your sheet, for example, and upload them into a custom list so SpellPundit can quiz you them for you. So yeah, I think those are two good ways. And for the custom list, it's especially if you don't have like a parent or like a coach who can quiz you. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And we can also see here like the difference and the similarities in the way that both Aditi and Shrey answer this question really speaks to the fact that These are all like some of the best vetted ways that these finalists have used to study, but it's really important that you do what works for you as long as it's consistent and efficient. So these are some excellent ways that Aditi and Shrey both provided for us as a basis to use. But I wanted to have two different spellers talk so we could really see how, individually they have different methods, maybe some similarities, but whatever works for them. So thank you both for sharing. Now let's move on to another huge trouble spots for spellers. We talked about, for example, German and French, rules like IBLE, ABLE. So next is the dreaded homonyms. So what are some techniques to prepare homonyms? And one question was also, what are the differences between homonyms and variants? And let's have Ananya take this one.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So homonyms and variants they might sound similar, but they are completely different. So homonyms are two words with either sort of similar or completely different, but they are different in definition. And variants are the entries that have the same definition but different spellings. So variants you don't need to remember the difference between, but homonyms you do. So what I would do for homonyms is that I would go to a spreadsheet and I would put, okay, this is the word and then this is the other word, and then I put the difference between them, and I'd keep little mnemonics to remember them, and I'd keep on doing that again and again and again. And then finally, I take all of that, what I took from all of that in the spreadsheet, I'd put that into a Quizlet, and I'd keep on revising it because homonyms, you have to memorize them in some way, whether it's mnemonic, whether it's constantly revising them, but it's not like a learn and apply method that you can use for it. So homonyms are completely rote memorization, and yeah, variants you don't really need to remember because variants are completely different in spelling, but just go for the easier one and don't remember both of the variants is what I would say. Just remember the one that you can. Remember one part of the variant and don't remember the other variant so that it's easy, because there are some words in some languages that have one variant which is really easy to spell and another variant that's super confusing, and it sometimes trips people up. So homonyms, you should remember both of the spellings, but variants, you should only just remember one. Yeah.
Thank you, Ananya. And to add a little bit on what Ananya said, variants are different from homonyms in that variants are both accepted spellings of the same word. For example, this does not apply to variants that have like British version or like British English in front of them. Only specifically in dictionary entries, sometimes you'll see an or this with like the same pronunciation under the bigger word. And what that means is that both of them are accepted spellings of that same word in American English, which means in the B, either way you spell it, as long as it has that same pronunciation, that can be considered correct. So that's why Ananya was saying choose the one that's easier for you to remember and the one that doesn't trip you up. On the other hand, homonyms, like Ananya explains so well, are words that, again, sound the same but are not the same, which means you cannot interchange them. So while you're studying, it's important to make sure that you know which word is a homonym and which word is a variant, so you don't get them switched up thinking that it's a variant. So Shrey, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so like there's variants with like different pronunciations, and I think you have to learn those because Scripps could like ask them. For example, like the word basha and pasha, they're like variants, but you have to learn both of them because since they have different pronunciations, Scripps could ask either of them. So yeah, that was just one thing I wanted to add.
Awesome, thank you for that. On the same topic of homonyms, we actually have something interesting that happens sometimes, very rarely, but when some homonyms both mean the same thing. So this one is for Shraddha. Shraddha, how do you distinguish some homonyms that both mean the same thing? So like should the speller take a note of this whenever it happens, or should they just let it be?
I think it's definitely important to take note of it because they're definitely fair game to be asked as homonyms. Because sometimes, even if homonyms mean the same thing, they might have like a different language of origin, or they might have like a different like extra alternate pronunciation. So there might be like really minute differences between the two that can make them different. But if they're like completely exactly the same, then I guess you can disregard them. But otherwise, it's important to take note.
Awesome. And so throughout so far, we've heard a lot of the spellers, whether it's in reviewing words and reviewing for vocab or language patterns, or even the differences of homonyms. We've heard a lot about using SpellPundit to review those differences. So how about we hear from Faizan? What is the most effective way to prep using SpellPundit?
So, what I did when I was like, so what I did and what I still do right now, like to use SpellPundit, I make a schedule for like the week or for the month, and and I plan out what I want to do for that, for like each day in the month. And that way I get a lot done while staying consistent, and getting a lot done, yeah.
For sure. And do you have any, I know you mentioned a bit earlier, but do you think a particular measure of sets or words is useful, or do you just think it should be based on whatever works best for the speller?
Yeah, so it definitely should just be based on like the speller skill level. Because if you're starting out spelling, you shouldn't be doing like 10 hours a day. That's just not reasonable. So uh so it definitely depends depending on what skill level you are. So if I had to give any advice, just keep it at a slow pace for right now, and see what's comfortable for you, and then try to like speed it up.
Awesome. So again, preparation is very individual to the speller. So this next one is for Alia. Alia, what do you think is the most effective way to prep using SpellPundit?
Um, I think that one of the most effective ways for me was I would go through a set and I would collect my missed words. I would make sure I was typing them out in a separate document and then have a family member quiz me on them. I find that it's really easy to miss a word twice, unless you have made sure that you really hammered it into your brain.
Awesome. And again, like you see how these two spellers have like somewhat similar, somewhat different approaches to preparation. So these are 100% great tips. I agree with both of them. And you should 100% take this as a basis and improve on it based on what your speller is more comfortable with. And Alia, to follow up on that question, I want to ask more about, not just for SpellPundit, but more generally, what was your approach to preparation for the bee, and how did those study habits evolve over time? So you can like build off of your previous answer.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, I mostly focused on memorizing words, and I realized that wasn't really getting me very far. So I started focusing extensively on roots and language rules. Having a coach really helped with that. And I find that rote memorization is good for the words that, you can't guess, but roots are just, they're so helpful. And I think that it should be a very early thing to start with. Maybe not the first thing, but I think you need to start early on those.
Awesome. And could you maybe just add on to that and speak a little bit to how that maybe like the preparation you put in, how your approach changed as you grew older and, got more advanced within the bee, like maybe in terms of how much time you were putting in or the difficulty that you worked at, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, at the very beginning, I was 6 years old. I wasn't really gonna be spending super long. But as I got older, I did definitely start studying more. I was studying, 6 hours on a regular weekday as I got into my 8th grade year. Uh, I was definitely learning to study more efficiently. Um, I think in the beginning, I would just kind of be, typing, not really thinking about it. And if I memorized a word, I would just like oh yay, but I wouldn't think about memorizing anything else. If I missed it, I might just skim over it, think, oh, I'll remember that, and then I didn't.
Yeah, that's definitely great. You have that experience to speak from like so many years of spelling experience. And I know a lot of the spellers here today that are attending also are, some of them are on the younger side that are beginning. So I'm sure what you said is inspirational to them as well. And moving on, Bruhit, the next question that you're going to get is a tricky one. So be prepared. Your question is, what do you wish you had done differently? So that could be in terms of preparation, in terms of, the effort you put in. You could also talk about this, like, what do you wish you had started earlier or focused more on?
Well, yeah, that is a hard question. But yeah, so, and I was only like serious about spelling since the last year. So maybe if I was a bit more serious, the past few years, then I didn't have to go through many setbacks and I could have a more smoother path to the championship. But to be honest, I love my journey as it is. But what you have to remember is I had a lot of setbacks, but the important thing is don't be demotivated by them. Learn from your setbacks, learn what you did wrong, and improve on that the next year. That's what I think really helped me, even though the first few years of my journey didn't go smoothly.
Yeah, that was a great answer, Bruhit. I completely agree. And I think a lot of spellers can agree as well, because most of us have been through those COVID years where the B got canceled in 2020. Like we were sort of uncertain about the future. And 2021 had a lot of like online competitions, etc. But I think what Bruhit says applies to not only all of our panelists, but to all of, the aspiring spellers here. If like you have one takeaway from this session, it should be that. It should be that, every speller faces those setbacks, myself included, and it's how you overcome them and put in that effort that really, defines how you put in that work. So, you all, such great, thoughtful answers. And just building off of this in terms of setbacks, it is definitely hard to stay consistent daily effort into the beat. So, how do you stay motivated and consistent in your practice, especially when you're making a lot of mistakes practicing for the bee or in smaller bees? How do you keep from getting discouraged? And let's hear from Shraddha on this one.
I'd say like the way I would keep from being discouraged, I would try to keep like my eyes on like the eventual goal, which is like obviously trying to do well at Scripps. I try to think about like how much I've worked hard to get to this point. Like a single moment doesn't really define you because it's more about like the hard work that you put in. It's just like when teachers tell you that like a test result doesn't like define who you are. It's the same thing, like a single spelling bee or like a single hard set that you're having trouble with doesn't define who you are because you worked really hard just to get there.
Yes, that was great. Like one moment doesn't define who you are. That's definitely an incredible piece of advice. Ananya, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I was sort of going to add to Shraddha and sort of how she said mainly focusing on the main goal. I feel like for some others in especially mine, in my point of view, I feel like focusing on little goals step by step and going to the big goal is sort of what kept me motivated. So whenever I used to spell, I used to think, okay, I'd finish this, then school B, and then I only have 3 more steps to go. Then I'd complete district, and then I only have regionals and Scripps. So mainly doing that makes the task feel less exhausting. And instead of mainly focusing on that goal, you sort of think, wow, this was just an amazing destination instead of just mainly, I mean, focusing on the journey rather than the destination, right? Like, so mainly just enjoying the path that you took to get there rather than mainly just focusing on the destination and sort of exhausting yourself over the thought of going to Scripps first. Yeah, but that's just my perspective.
No, thank you so much for sharing. I think I'm so glad that we've had, three of y'all speak to this point because I do think it's very useful for spellers to learn how not to get discouraged. And I'm really happy that we heard those three perspectives and we heard the slight differences, in those three perspectives and what you all thought personally to help you keep from getting discouraged, right? So these are all just examples of, how spellers that are passionate about their craft, they really keep going and they keep that motivation. So now you heard three different tips from Rohit, Shraddha, and Ananya on how to keep that motivation going. So hopefully that helps y'all too. And so far, we've had such great responses from all of you, so thoughtful and informative. And we've been talking a lot about individual work and the work that you can put in to, prepare yourself before the bee on your own or maybe with your family. But there are also spellers that have had coaches like throughout this journey. So, Alia, you mentioned having a coach. Do you think spellers need a coach or not? And what personally worked for you, like technique-wise?
I don't think that spellers necessarily need a coach. I think that'll definitely speed up a speller's development. I know Kirsten Santos, who placed very high in the past three national spelling bees, did not have a coach. But I know that a lot of the top spellers did. I think it's up to personal preference, and if you want to get a coach, I think you'll definitely feel the benefits starting very early.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And around what stage in your journey did you get a coach?
I got a coach in about, I think, late 2021. At this point, I had gotten close to winning the Arizona Spelling Bee 3 times. It was kind of depressing at that point, and I knew I wanted to go much further. I think that it's not necessarily great to start super early. I think that you already have to have a base knowledge, like at least you can't be misspelling like words that, everybody uses. You need to make sure that you have a good base knowledge. And then a coach can just really take you to the next level.
For sure. So making sure you have those fundamentals set on your own. And also to hear another perspective on that, Aryan, at what stage do you recommend getting a coach?
Right. So I had a coach since 5th grade because that's when I really got serious about spelling bee. That's when I started my Scripps journey too. I first did a Scripps bee in 5th grade. So I would recommend 5th grade. 5th grade is usually the best time to get a spelling coach. And yeah, I felt it was really helpful as many online bees were showing up too, and I was able to showcase like what I wanted to do. And usually I would recommend getting a coach if you really want to do spelling. If spelling is what you want to like dedicate your time to, and if you want to succeed in that, then having a coach is really helpful. If you don't, then I would not recommend having a coach. So it really depends on what you want to do in the future, but definitely 5th, 6th grade is usually the right time to have a coach.
So in your opinion, it's more of like a personal thing. Like personally, what do you want from the bee? What stage do you think you're at?
Yeah, so I think that way because you need a coach to like succeed, and they have more experience, right? So they can like share you knowledge, and that's what basically a coach does. Like they share you knowledge of like not just words, but like their experiences, what they did right and wrong, what they like any sort of thing that they have encountered. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you, both of you, for those insightful answers. And so far, the preparation that we've been talking about has been before the actual competition. So we talked about individual strategies, like things that you could do at home. We've also discussed coaches and maybe what stage you think is right for you to get a coach. But these are things spellers can do to make sure that they are prepared before the competition. But what about the day of? So that's what we're kind of going to transition into, talking about, the actual bee when you're in front of that microphone, those pronouncers. Of course, you guys have been, at the biggest stage of competition, the Scripps National Spelling Bee. So you know how it feels to be in front of that mic with Dr. Bailey at what is essentially the largest spelling bee competition in the world. So one thing about bees is that they involve large audiences. So like the year I won, over like 6 million people tuned into the finals, and even more watched Bruhat this year, and all of you. And there are lights, cameras, and live audiences, even, at the lower levels like region and state. So how do you manage stage fright, and what techniques do you use that you don't freeze? And let's hear from Bruhat first on this one.
Okay, so a lot of people feel stage fright because the time they enter the National Spelling Bee might be the first time they're ever up on a stage. And considering the huge audience and all of those cameras, it could be a bit frightening at first. But the most important thing is you have to be calm, because if you're nervous whenever you get up and you have to spell your word, that's just going to be in your mind the whole time, and you're not really going to be focused on your word. And focus is the most important thing, especially in those 90 seconds. So try to do some things I did to relieve stress was two things. Was one, I would socialize. So before the finals, we had a finalists dinner, and it was for 3 hours. So I finished eating in like half an hour, and then the remaining 2 hours I just, socialized. And then when I entered the stage for the finals, I didn't feel much pressure on me. So for me, socializing definitely worked. Also, something else that worked for me was before I would head down to the ballroom, I would watch like a funny YouTube video or something like that makes your mood light. So there's a lot of ways that you could relieve your there's a lot of ways that you can feel calm. So I'd recommend just find which one works for you and do that, because it's really important to be calm on stage.
Thank you for those tips. I definitely agree. And I think something very important that you said there was, socializing, that aspect of camaraderie and having friends in the spelling community. There's this saying that almost every speller has heard at least once, that in spelling bees, you're not competing against the other spellers, you're competing against the dictionary. And that is so true of this competition in particular, because when you come out of this experience, no matter what level you're at, you'll find that you have made so many friends who have similar interests and passions as you in this community that is the spelling bee. So that is definitely something that I agree with. And let's hear from someone else as well on those stress management techniques and how to focus on stage. Aditi, why don't you share some techniques that you have to make sure that you focus even when you're, in front of so many people?
Yes. So nervousness was definitely a thing that I struggled with, especially on stage. This is gonna sound very corny, but before I went on stage, I recommend techniques like belly breathing, box breathing, the 3-2-1 method, which is basically focusing on 3 things you can see, 2 things you can touch, and 1 thing you can hear. There are definitely variations of that, but it's a great grounding tool. Staying grounded is one of the most important things. While you are spelling, it will help you focus and stay in the moment and eventually do well.
Awesome. So you gave some more like mindfulness techniques is what worked for you personally. Awesome. Thank you. Something else that really stresses spellers out is if you get a word that you don't know or is very difficult, how do you tackle it? And how does the preparation that you do beforehand help guess the spelling for an unknown word? So basically, if you see a word that's way harder than you thought it was going to be, or you just completely haven't seen it, how do you guess it well? And let's go to Ananya for this one.
Yeah, so before I sort of figured out how to handle this, I'd have like a lot of problem just focusing and how to like solve my word. And when I'd get on stage, um the first thing I used to do was freeze, and it made me look really awkward before I figured out how I do it. So first, take a deep breath, know that you can still figure out the word, because when you freeze, the game's already over. You're already out. So mainly just keeping that calm is the first step. Second is where the rules and roots come in. That's where you would start using your language patterns, and that's where you would start using all the roots that you need. So try to see if you can piece up the word together by rules and roots. Rote memorization will not be your friend when you are in distress at the stage. Mainly, so first, take a deep breath. Second, use rules and roots. Always ask and confirm the pronunciation would be my third one, because you need to make sure that your pronunciation is right when the pronouncer keeps asking it. Another tip that I would say is always ask for alternate pronunciations, because I would always panic for a word until I heard the alternate pronunciation, which was probably an easier version of the word that I probably heard more, or that would be helpful to spelling the word. And I feel like if you just do all that, I think that that was mainly how I pieced together my word. But the problem is all the other steps are easy, but getting to the first is the most hardest, because a lot of people forget to stay calm. And what I would also recommend is before the B, as soon as you start spelling, I would also recommend training your mind, because a lot of people say that the dictionary is the real person against, but in competition, I really believe that real thing that you're going against is your mind. So training your mind and doing meditation and using meditation techniques, as Aditi said, I think that that would be the best thing to start with. And then after that, as soon as you get to stage, you'll be more calmer. And the rest of the three steps are just so easy to move on from there. Yeah.
Awesome. That was a very in-depth answer, which I'm sure a lot of these spellers appreciate, because as I'm sure a lot of you know, all the preparation you do beforehand, it's really important to be able to access it in your brains when you actually get to the day of the competition. So for sure, that's very helpful. Faizan, could you add to that as well, like how you tackle words that you're going to have to guess on stage?
Yeah, um, one of the words like I got on stage was the word Dana, like at Scripps. So I hadn't recognized it immediately, so I asked for all the information, which is like the very first thing you should do if you don't know the word. So I asked for the information, and then they told me that the language of origin was Avestan. And going back to my language patterns, I realized that in Avestan, AE is like a common spelling for the A sound. So based on that, I guessed DAENA, and I was able to get it right. Another thing that can also help other than language patterns is roots. And like if you don't recognize a word immediately, you can ask for roots. And it will like it can tell you lots of stuff like whether a schwa is spelled one way or another. And yeah.
Awesome. So you're really talking about more of those like language patterns and roots and how that plays into guessing words. And also, let's also hear from, let's see, Brooke. And so we've so far have talked about guessing the spelling of an unknown word. I know you talked a bit about vocabulary earlier. So if you could expand on that. You mentioned roots. So do you have any tips for guessing a vocabulary word that you might see that you don't really recognize instantly? And maybe also utilize strategies in terms of the options that you have in front of you.
Okay, so for the main thing is roots, yes, but for each vocabulary word, you'll have three options. So usually you can eliminate one, which won't make much sense. And also, one other thing you can do is if two options basically mean like the same thing, they're just like worded the same way, pay attention to those because in one of them, like a word might be behind, but might be like out of your view that might change the whole meaning of that. So pay attention to options that are worded similar. Also, a lot of onomatopoeia words are usually asked at Scripps, like words that kind of like sound, like the word yop. That was asked in the semifinals, I think. Yeah, semifinals. So words like that definitely memorize because, oh yeah, and also clunker. So onomatopoeia words definitely memorize a lot of those. And yeah, memorize your roots and also go with your intuition. So if one option you just have a feeling that that's right, then just go with it, you know? The best thing you could do is guess.
And could you explain, like, onomatopoeia words to those who may not be familiar with them?
Yeah, okay, so onomatopoeia words like boom, bam, those are like the common ones that you hear, but they're words that represent the sound of what the object makes. So, like, something else that was asked, yeah, clunker, that was asked. That, like, it's like memorable basically. On onomatopoeia words, they're memorable to remember because the syllables make like a a different sound that you could easily remember. So those words, they're usually short and they're memorable because of their syllables. So those words are definitely you should memorize. They're a must for vocabulary.
For sure. So mainly like those words that sound like they're spelled like what they sound in real life. Like, for example, you gave the like BAM as an example. Like that's literally what it sounds like in real life, and it's spelled that way as well. Buzz is another good example, like the buzz of a bee. So thank you for that very specific, genre of words that show up in vocab. And is there any other specific panelist who would like to speak on guessing vocab words? No?
So,
Awesome.
oh,
Oh, yes, go ahead,
oh.
Arya.
So vocab, I was never really great at vocab, so I would say guessing vocab words is a bit difficult, but you can eventually do it. You can kind of like sound it out, as Blue had said, with onomatopoeia and stuff. But you could also like try figuring it out, like based on what you think it might mean. Try to use some roots. I learned that a lot of the words they use in vocab rounds were based on Latin roots, and if you know those by heart, I think it'll be like a little bit easier to figure out vocab words. I remember in 2021 and 2023, 2021 was solely root based, and 2022 was a bit of a mess up with vocab. But 2023 was mainly root based, and I think that really helped. One of the words I'm pretty sure I got was vermivorous, and I basically said that it was like like an animal who eats a worm. That's what I got in the finals, and I would really recommend using roots. But if you really don't know it, I would just say try sounding it out, and I guess go with your gut. That's what I would say.
Awesome. Great tip. I see. Let's go to Shrey and then Aditi. Because that's the order they're on my screen, and then Ananya.
So yeah, I had to like say something about vocab. I think an important part of vocab is going with your gut because like in my experience at least, if you doubt yourself, you're probably gonna get it wrong, and I feel like your first instinct is most likely to be right. So if you have no idea, there's no roots or anything, just follow what your gut thinks it is, and I think you'll get it right more than 50% of the time. So yeah.
So going off of instinct. Before you give your answer, I saw a question in the chat to sort of explain, what the vocab round is. I think one of our panelists did give an answer to that, but I'll just answer it out loud in case any of our attendees missed it. So a vocab round is, since 2021, it has been a part of the Scripps National Spelling Bee, and there are also other organizations that hold, vocabulary bees specifically. And how in Scripps, how it works is you're given a word and you are read it out in a sentence, for example, but it won't just be like, what does X word mean? It'll be like, for example, smart. So like if someone is smart, you would describe them as, and then there'll be 3 options. For example, option 1 would be, or A would be intelligent, B would be tired, and C would be hungry. And obviously, the answer is option A, intelligent. The words that you see at the national stage will not be that easy, but you do have 30 seconds once the question is read to pick one of those 3 options that you think is the correct answer. So format-wise, I hope that answers the question as to how the vocab round works. You are read sort of a sentence putting the word in context, and then you have to choose one of 3 options that you think accurately defines it. So that's just the structure. And so far, our panelists have been giving, excellent tips on how to go through the vocabulary round, because I saw a lot of questions on that earlier too. So now let's move on to Aditi.
Okay. So this isn't necessarily for guessing on stage. It's more of a vocab tip in general, but I would say read a lot. I'm a very voracious reader. I love reading. I've loved reading ever since I was a kid. And I'd recommend reading a lot of books, reading a lot of news. A lot of the words that you will see in the books and in the news are great game for Scripps vocab rounds. And also the reading comprehension and connections you're able to make the more you read the books and news, that will definitely help you on stage while you're guessing.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. When I was a speller, to prepare for vocab, one thing that I would do is constantly, look at the news. I was also a very big reader. So that was something that I think, a lot of spellers have in common, actually. So those are definitely great tips for seeing those words in a real world setting. So, Ananya, what tips can you offer to these spellers?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few things. A lot of the vocabulary words in Scripps, other than the year 2022, I feel like they'll sort of mellow down this year, but not as much as a lot of people are expecting. I feel like Scripps's vocabulary is sort of based on words that are easy but also hard at the same time. Another thing I noticed is that there were a lot of words based off of onomatopoeias, just like Bruhat said, and adjectives as well. So, for example, there was this one word, like strapping, and it would be sort of confusing for people to not know, but it's sort of like having like physical characteristics, like strong physical characteristics. So sort of like that. And there were also like characteristics that a human might do. So those are also really good words. Also, another vocab resource that I would definitely recommend is the book Defining Success, because it also has practice quizzes, just like Sesquipedalia, and lists that you can note your vocabulary words that you learn every single day for good vocabulary word retention and good revision. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think,
Can I add something about vocabulary?
oh yeah, go for it.
All right, so one thing you should memorize is the Merriam-Webster unabridged word of the day. It's like every day it has a word and it gives you all of the information and the spelling. Memorize the spelling and the definition because those words are asked at nationals for spelling and vocabulary. So that's really important.
For sure. Like I know there were some questions on where to study and how to study vocab. So I think Ananya and Rohit, your answers really added on to what the others said as well in terms of vocab. Ari, do you have one last thing to add?
Yeah, so I would also say that only books, like only doing books isn't that helpful. You have to like look outside too. Like I usually like look on like I don't know, like anything I can find, like menus, street signs, literally anything, and start like scouring for words. I remember Merriam-Webster used to have this calendar, and I bought that calendar for like 2 years maybe, and I would just look at the word of the day each day. It wasn't like the Merriam-Webster word of the day as such, but it would just be like a word each day, and they would give like a definition, language of origin, and everything. I thought that was really helpful for me. And I would just say, just look at anything, just read books. Read books are really, really helpful. I learned a lot of words through books. And it's not just like any books that you read, like school textbooks too. Like social studies textbooks or like um I don't know, like math textbooks or anything. Like those words really helped me. For example, a word I got was pueblo, and pueblo came in a. I learned it through geography bees actually. So I did many other things like before spelling bees. So pueblo really helped me. Like the geography bees really helped me answer like that question and stuff. So I think it's really helpful.
Awesome. And I think one thing that we've both seen in the chat and heard from all of our amazing panelists is reading, reading, reading. And which is something I completely agree with. You'll be surprised, how many actually like difficult words or like sneakily difficult words they manage to like hide into these like middle grade like novels and books and everything. Like just by reading Harry Potter, honestly, like you can gain so many vocab words. So definitely I agree with everybody who has said, reading so far, that really helps. That is definitely true. Aryan, you also said something else that I want to touch on, especially for beginning spellers. You mentioned menus and just like writing down or making note of words wherever you went. That is such a great tactic for spellers who are beginning or want to, learn words as consistently as they can. Honestly, this way it kind of starts feeling like a game or like a scavenger hunt of some sort. Like whenever, for example, I'm at an Olive Garden, I'm always looking at the menu to see like, what Italian words on there, what pasta words, what food words, beverages are on there. And honestly, that actually helps you a lot in spotting these words in the wild. So that way, if you're having difficulty remembering them, you also have like, a mnemonic that goes with it. Like, oh, this word is hard, but I saw it like, on that menu of a French bakery or whatever it is, right? And you'll be surprised how many kinds of words you can spot in the wild like that. So I thought that was a great tip. And keep in mind that that's not just for vocab, that's also equally applicable for spelling. So thank you so much for sharing that. You all gave such thoughtful answers for vocabulary. Thank you. And one last question, sort of talking about competition specifically. This question is something that I know a lot of beginning spellers have. So asking for information. Do you ask for all the information or do you selectively ask for information? And like why? Or do you have like a particular order? Why so? Let's hear from Shrey first.
So me personally, I like to ask for all the information because, yeah, I feel like asking for it separately kind of wastes time, and I don't really see the benefit. But like when you get all of it at once, it just lets you soak in the word quicker. So yeah, that's why I would recommend asking all the information.
Awesome. Alia, how about you?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? My audio was cutting out.
Oh, of course, no problem. So the question was, do you ask for all the information or selectively ask for information? Like, what is your process while asking for information?
I always ask for all the information. I tend to usually, if I don't know the word, I'll ask for all the information first, and then ask for each piece of information separately, except maybe the sentence. I don't really care about the sentence that much. But I find that especially the definition and language of origin can help me with roots. Yeah, I'm back on the roots thing. I love roots. Um, all the information is always helpful. Alternate pronunciations. I think that's a thing that a lot of inexperienced spellers miss. They don't ask for alternate pronunciations, and then they'll miss like a suffix or something because Greek has a thing where it'll sometimes have the os ending be pronounced as a schwa in the first pronunciation, and in that case, especially, alternate pronunciations are really helpful.
Awesome. And just like building back off on that before I go to the panelists that have their hand raised. Do you think that the order that you ask those questions in, like you mentioned, you don't really ask for the sentence, like asking alternate pronunciations, do you have a specific order in which you ask those? And how do you think that, helps you, especially with the more difficult words that you might have to guess?
I mean, I kind of do have an order, but it's not for any reason. I just have it's kind of a habit. I'll usually ask for alternate pronunciations first, then the part of speech, the definition, and the language of origin, and then I'll ask for alternate pronunciations again to make sure I didn't miss anything. And if I want to ask group questions, I might ask for the definition or language of origin again.
Awesome. So I think I agree with something that Alia said, where it was like, you don't really have like an order for a specific reason, it's just a habit. I think we'll hear from these other four spellers and they might have something different to say, but there's definitely something in that, like you choose which questions you like to ask, and then sometimes there's like the order just comes naturally. But there are also other spellers that have a very specific order. So let's hear from the four who have their hand raised. Aditi, you're the first on my screen.
Yeah, so while I didn't have a specific order in which I asked certain questions, I believe that asking for the definition is one of the most helpful things you can do. Definition and language of origin, because I may have put this in the chat a couple of times, but the definition is really, really important, especially if it's a word that doesn't have a great language of origin or obvious roots. Listening to the definition a couple times will help you pick out key details. Like, for example, the definition could say that the word is like, for example, like a kind of cheese or a kind of mineral, which can tell you or help you connect that word to other words that you've heard that have similar definitions. And the language of origin will obviously help you figure out language patterns, so I highly recommend asking for those on stage.
Awesome. Next, Aryan. Can you add on to that?
So I would say it's like a bit complicated. So wait, could you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. The question was, so like how do you ask for information? And like why do you maybe selectively ask? Does that order, have any impact specifically on how you're going about like, guessing words or asking for information in general?
Okay. It's really a case-by-case scenario, but I would say that if I knew the word, then I would ask less information and I would spell it faster. And I would usually go by, I used to do like, I used to like ask like all the information, but really now, like in eighth grade year, I've been asking like case by case, like, oh, definition first and language of origin, just like, if I know the word, this is just to buy time. And this is just like to confirm that, okay, I have the word in my head. This is correct. All the information is correct. When I don't know the word, however, I ask for all the information first, like definition and everything. This is to first understand the word and what its the components are and everything. The second and third time I ask it, right? This is just to buy time because I don't know the word. I'm trying to guess. I'm trying to piece things together, and I'm just like hoping that I can like piece it together by like the second or third time I ask it, kind of. So this is just to like get more information, more like things to ask about. So I think that's how I really tackled asking information.
That's fair. I think it was interesting, how you said the first few times you actually ask it to get that information, but then after that, there's like a tactic there to it. So thank you for that. Next, let's go to Ananya.
Yeah. So I know there have been some perspectives that say that all the information is a very good method to getting the words, but personally feel that I don't think that's one of the best methods to use, especially because when people get on a stage, especially at Scripps, they forget that the time limit is there, and the time limit is not 2 minutes, it's 90 seconds. So it's important to make sure that you know what information you're asking when you get on there and you know how you're going to do it, whatever habit you do. But mainly, the order I would go is first language of origin and definition are a must. Definitely no sentence because I don't really see how that would help. But there are some people who ask for all the information other than the sentence. Part of speech doesn't really help if you know, like, if the part of speech is like mentioned, because if you know that something is a food or a place or a clothing, then you know that it's a noun. Or if you know that if it's like the act of running, then it's a verb. So mainly focusing on the language of origin and the definition is really important. Asking for alternate pronunciations is super important. And asking the word again and again is also very important because sometimes you might think that you have like the spelling down, I mean the word down, but sometimes you might not be pronouncing it correctly and that might lead to like a major mishap. So, mainly just making sure that you have all of that in the right amount of time would be helpful, and making sure that you're asking the only the information that you need to know and not asking things just for the sake of stalling time is I think it is personally very important. So that is why I would mainly just recommend selectively asking parts of the information rather than just asking for all of the information. Yeah.
Awesome. That was definitely a great tip. And for the sake of time, we are going to move on. So thank you all so much for your input. And we did hear, some great input from everybody who spoke on, tips for the bee. So thank you guys so much. And I'm sure it helped a lot of, the rising prospective spellers when they heard about both the vocab round and how you structure, asking for information. So thank you so much. And again, you all gave such great tips for competition that I'm sure will help everybody attending here. But there is one part of the Scripps National Spelling Bee in particular that follows, a slightly different set of rules, and that is the spell off. I was actually the first ever champion to win through a spell off in 2022. And Bruhat and Faizan's incredible spell-off at the 2024 B was a treat to watch because they were both exceptional at it. So I'm sure I saw some questions in the chat earlier, and I'm sure a majority of you would like to hear about that. So let's start with Faizan. Could you please describe, the spell-off for those who don't know what it is?
Yes, sure. So Scripps, so let's say your Scripps is down to their last two spellers. At that point, they they let them duel it out for a little bit. And if they're like if they keep spelling their words correctly, they go to a lightning round called a spell off, where basically you have to spell as many words as possible in 90 seconds. So the pronouncer will give you the word, um, and you have to spell the word as quick as possible, press a button, and then they'll give you the next word. And that's basically how it goes for 90 seconds. And uh, yeah, there have only been two so far, and I have gotten the great opportunity to participate in the second one. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That was an excellent rundown. Again, spell off as just as Faizan explained, 90 seconds, as many words as possible. Just to add on to that, the spell off also, like you can see the words and information, of course, not the pronunciation or the spelling of the word, but you are able to see the meaning and language of origin as well as part of speech on a monitor in front of you. So that is how, spellers like Faizan, Vikram, me, and Bruhat were able to, churn out those words because we're not just hearing the pronunciation, we're also seeing all the information in front of us. So that I thought I would add, just so that one rule is also explained to those who are watching. So Bruhat, of course, you obviously had to do the spell off this year. So what helped you to prepare for the spell off, and what did you do additionally on top of your normal preparation to help prepare you for this in particular?
Yes, so every day, my dad, he would go through all of before it used to be 10 lists, it used to be 4 modules, but like, let's just keep it the same thing. He used to go through all of the words in SpellPundit, and he used to find 30 words that he thought were hard. And then remember, I think this was talked about earlier, but there's a module called custom module, and that's where you can upload any words that you think you need extra practice on. So my dad would upload those 30 words into the custom module, and then every day he would we would just simulate it as it's a spell off. Like I would have I would just so he would click the words, click the pronunciation. I would spell it as fast as I can. I would just hit the table, and then he would go to the next word, and then we would just do that until he would also set a 90-second timer, and he would do that until the timer was up, and then after the timer was up, we would go over all the words, and we would see which ones I missed. And then we did that every day, so that's how I got practice, and I eventually improved, so that at the Scripps spell off, I was able to get 29.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you had like a very, practiced method of preparing. So Faizan, one thing that is tricky for spellers is making sure to get out those letters very clearly. I know I had an experience when I was much younger, like maybe second grade, where I just went on stage and I spelled it so fast on in a regional B that the judges didn't know whether I said a V or a B. So obviously clarity is something that's very important. So how did you make sure to, practice for the spell off by making sure that you were very clear in spelling those words?
So I didn't really practice for the spell off, but I did learn some things like after I participated in it. So first, for spellers who are worried that they might like misspeak, I actually misspoke on one word, and I realized that was because I was going too fast. And so one thing is to slow your pace down, and another thing is to make sure you're emphasizing uh like letters that are that could sound like another letter. Like for example, like the word like the letter A, it can like in some cases if you say it fast, it can sound like the letter E. So so yeah, basically just make sure you're emphasizing tricky letters and make sure you're going at a slow pace but fast enough that you can like get a lot of words done in 90 seconds.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And thank you to all of our panelists for, the incredible and thoughtful answers that they gave. And I hope that, all of the beginning or, interested spellers here today really took some tips away from the session that can help them in the future.
Hey, that was great. Harini, thank you for stewarding this and hosting this event. It was excellent. And panelists, on behalf of SpellPundit, I want to thank you, each of you. I mean, you have a lot of experience, and then you shared with everybody. I hope I'm sure all of them really like this one. So I see a lot of good comments in the chat window as well. So. So yeah, and more people, I mean, about 100 people, 105 or so, I think, participated in it. Then I'm sure a lot more will watch this when we upload on the social media, and then many more learn from your experience. Thank you all.